Welcome to Uncaged. Today we are speaking with Sujay Sarkar. Sujay is joining us from Dubai today. He is the Senior Vice President and Group Head of Corporate Finance at really a major global player, Olam Agri. We'll talk a little bit about Olam Agri and the work that they're doing, but we're also going to be talking a little bit more today about Sujay and the broader, I'd say, financial world that we see ourselves in right now going into 2024. It's the beginning of a new year, new exciting trends that we have to face and deal with. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But before we get there, Sujay, tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Sure. So I'm a chartered accountant by education. I started off my career in India. I spent the first 10 years of my working life in India, in New Delhi, the capital. So I worked across different industry segments in that stint before I moved to Africa to join Olam in December 2010. And I spent around 11 years in Africa, living and working in different countries, primarily on the West Africa coast. I've traveled extensively across the continent, been to most countries in Africa, and loved our time there. Post that, we have shifted to Dubai, and I've been in Dubai now for 2.5 years. And I've handled a variety of roles from country CFO to regional CFO, and currently, as you said, I'm the group head of corporate finance for Olam Agri.
So just tell me a little bit quickly about Olam Agri and the space that you're focused on right now.
So Olam Group is listed on the Singapore Stock Exchange, and it is one of the global majors in agri commodities. We have a wide gamut of trading operations wherein we trade all types of commodities from cocoa, coffee, cashew, cotton, rice, grains, etc. Olam Agri is one of the operating groups within the Olam Group fold, and this has businesses of grains, rice, cotton, wood products, rubber as the primary business segments. And we do multi-million tons of trading across the globe in these commodities, as well as we also have multiple manufacturing processing facilities globally. Currently, we have a presence in some 35, 36 countries, and we have a major presence in Africa.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, at the heart of Olam Agri in terms of being the growth engine.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I would say, Sujay, that we're living in a moment where I'd say logistics, supply chain, and agriculture included have been tried and tested in a million times. My younger son had a summer internship at a commodities exchange for wheat. And just kind of processing the whole wheat space has been fascinating. So I can only imagine the complexities of the logistics over the last couple of years that you and the team have faced there. And I think it puts you in a really interesting position to talk a little bit about what you're seeing from kind of a broader macroeconomic perspective here in 2024. I mean, we've seen all of the speeches coming out of Davos this week, and we're seeing all of the changes going forward. What are you seeing out there for 2024?
Yeah, I think 2024 is shaping up to be a very, very interesting year. So for me, I think the key themes would be the multiple elections coming up across the globe, starting with US, UK, India, Indonesia, multiple countries in Africa. Even the European Parliament is, I guess, headed for elections. So the outcome of all of these elections has major implications in terms of policy direction and the priorities of the different governments across the globe. And, we are starting this year with one of the highest ever interest rate regimes across the globe. Still, inflation is raging quite high, and I don't expect the interest rates to come off anytime soon. While there are a lot of people punting that maybe Fed and ECB will start cutting the rates perhaps maybe Q2 of this year. My personal belief is that is going to happen in the second half of 2024. So the real cost of funding is still going to remain quite high. And as you also touched upon, so the supply chain complexity and the challenges of managing that is, I think, at a record high, and it is not going to get easier anytime soon. So not only is there a lot of dislocation because of ongoing issues in China with the economy slowing down there, and China has been a major manufacturing unit for supplying to the rest of the world. But we also have issues because of the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, Israel-Palestine war, and now the recent issues which we are facing in the Red Sea, the attacks on all the ships happening from the pirates there. So my belief, companies which have diversified their sourcing locations and they have kind of moved from a just-in-time approach to a just-in-case approach of inventory management are better prepared for the world at large. And finally, I just want to add one last thing, that while we've always had, even Cold Wars in earlier US-Soviet era, but now I believe there is a Cold War on the tech front. One fifth of, I guess, the world's total traded commodities are semiconductor chips, and they are a core component from cars to automobiles to mobiles, etc. And the recent Taiwanese elections have thrown up a government which is kind of not very friendly towards China, or so China would like to believe. And with the US elections happening in November, it's going to be a very interesting time as to how the US-China trade war plays out, with the focus on who gets to control the technological supply chain.
Yeah.
So these, I think, are.
I think that that's interesting. The China situation will be interesting to track. I mean, for someone that has worked in so many different countries around the world, I mean, I would have to say that where your life began is perhaps, I think, the most interesting market right now in the world. Tell me a little bit about your experiences in different markets, some of the commonalities, some of the differences that you've seen. And I'd love to maybe just hear to start out. I mean, are you seeing dynamism in the Indian market right now?
Yeah, I think India is in a very sweet spot. So it has a good growth rate ahead for the GDP as a whole. It is getting a good, let's say, place to be in terms of the general age profile of the population. So while it is the most populous country in the world, but I think it is also has the maximum people in working age. So that places it quite well in the overall South Asian sphere. So historically, it has been bogged down by various issues in terms of policy, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. But over the last 5 to, let's say, 8 years, I think there has been a tremendous change in terms of the reforms, all going in the right direction, huge investments going on the infra field. And the entire industrial landscape is, I think, undergoing a very interesting change. So there are a host of factors which are, I guess, playing out their part in India, turning from a largely agrarian economy to a service economy, and now scaling up its manufacturing sector as well.
That's great. Now, again, kind of building on that. So compare and contrast that to some of these other markets that you've worked in around the world.
Sure. So post India, as I said, I have lived in Africa for more than a decade. And Africa overall, I think, is a very, very different mix of countries. So there are countries like, say, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Senegal on the West Africa coast, which are doing relatively well, have strong GDP growth rates, pretty manageable inflation levels, and doing quite well for a sustained period of time now. But then there are other countries, say Nigeria, Mozambique, South Africa, which have their own unique set of problems. Very high inflation, depreciating currency, underinvestment in infrastructure, political turmoil, which are really dragging down their economies and proving to be really tough to manage in the ongoing tussle between inflation versus growth. So my experience has been that Africa should not be looked at as a single country. There are country-specific issues and country-specific solutions. So any organization which is looking to make a foray into African markets should have country-specific strategies in place.
Yeah, I agree. It's always one of those things where it just shows, I suppose, kind of the lack of knowledge of markets when we think of when people refer to Africa, it being a continent as if it's one nation with one set of
Yeah,
problems.
yeah,
And certainly it's a variety of regions in and of itself and a variety of different
sure.
disparate challenges. But we have not only challenges on a geo perspective and a geopolitical perspective. Certainly, again, as always, you touched on the microchip, microprocessor marketplace and how things have been evolving in that space from a trade perspective. Although all of those little chips are powering a new revolution, which is the machine learning revolution. And I think that you'd have to have been sleeping for the last several years to not have been caught up with some form of news on generative AI. And I'd be curious, you're working in a multinational. How are you and the team thinking about AI and Gen AI in the context of the financial space?
So Gen AI is, I think, really the catchphrase or the buzzword emanating from 2023. So while AI has been around for many years, but 2023, I guess, is the year when it has come into the conversation space across the globe, be it boardroom to drawing room to anywhere and everywhere. So I was reading recently some reports from McKinsey which said that Gen AI on its own can generate between like 2.5 to 4.5 trillion dollars in value, with the biggest impact being seen in software engineering, marketing, and sales. Within the finance function, I think it's our job to look at Gen AI as a company-wide resource or a tool and focus on those use cases which have the maximum value to add while we continue to climb the learning curve on Gen AI.
Yeah.
So there are some companies, especially tech companies like Microsoft, which have gone far ahead in this learning curve in terms of coming up with possible uses of Gen AI. There are financial institutions like, say, Morgan Stanley, which is using it extensively in the wealth management space. But generally speaking, and when I'm talking about AI or machine learning, I think there are multiple use cases which one can work upon. So if I were to give some examples, maybe we can start using this in scenario or response planning,
Yeah.
doing augmented revenue forecasting, which can have multiple different scenarios given different assumptions behind it. We can use it for cash flow forecasting, which is extremely critical given the geopolitical events and the macro indicators currently prevailing.
Mhm.
It's also a very good tool for performance tracking, doing a root cause analysis, or even doing a market value analysis if you're trying to enter into a new market, because there'll be a host of different parameters which we need to bring together to develop a valuation model or a performance model.
Mhm. That's
And
interesting.
I think in current environment where the so-called black swan events are not black swan anymore because they happen with far more regularity. So using AI as a predictive or a preventive risk control, risk mitigation tool, I think is very, very important. So these are some of the areas where we could possibly use, I guess, AI and machine learning for.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see the uptake on nation and really kind of how it shifts behavior. That's kind of generally the next, I'd say, tipping point for me, which is to understand how people build new rituals and processes in a way that actually are different and modified based on the utilization of the technology. I mean, imagine a world today without Excel. It's almost unimaginable, right? A friend of mine said once to me, said that product changed the way I think, and it's true. It has had an impact, and we'll see how AI impacts that. But, there have been so many other big changes over the last couple of years that have changed not only the way we think, but just the way we approach day-to-day life and work. And I'm imagining when you're working in a company that is active in over 36 plus markets and really kind of managing such volume from a trade perspective, that the question of how you work has probably been something that's been discussed. Now during the pandemic, we all rushed home and found laptops and worked away, but over the last couple of months, 18 months, I'd say, there are many, many leaders, some prominent folks even in the finance space, that have been quite adamant that people need to be back in the offices, back in the banks, and making things happen. What's your stand on that?
Yeah, so I think the pandemic has kind of fundamentally changed the way we work and think about work. And people at large have got used to working from home or any other location, which kind of lets them work seamlessly. It has its own advantages and disadvantages. There are functions which could possibly work remotely, primarily, I guess, in the tech space. But there are also functions role which need your physical presence. You can't possibly run a factory completely remotely even now, right? So I think thinking about the best way to approach a remote workforce, I would say there are a couple of key challenges and solutions which we are looking to work upon. One is, in any organization, while you do provide a long-term direction and mission to for people to connect with, but in a setup where part of your team is working on ground in office and part of your team might be working remote, and you could have teams working in different time zones, etc. To manage that kind of mixed team environment, I think it is extremely important that we focus on keeping the team energized,
Mm,
provide them psychological safety, provide them a shared sense of purpose, and encourage regular, normal interactions, especially through maybe video conference facilities like Zoom.
right.
The sense of community should not get completely lost.
Are you
And
finding, Sujay, that people's skills have somehow shifted with these new work structures? I mean, a lot of times you hear stories, it's usually angry parents that I would argue blame their bad parenting on social channels. But at times they'll say, oh, well, my child is using video games too much, therefore they don't think as much or they think in a different way. That's kind of the classic generational battle. But in the work context, are you finding that this new work structure that has taken hold, which is kind of a bit of a mix of real and virtual and using these technologies, how is it impacting us as human beings? I mean, are we working differently? Do we have different sets of skills? Are you seeing weaknesses appearing?
yeah, I think one key change has been that, the boundaries between work and personal life have kind of blurred.
Hmm.
So since we are using more and more remote communication tools like Teams or Zoom, etc., so everybody feels that you can practically reach out to anybody and everybody at any point in time. You can pull in someone into a Teams call or a Zoom call, and everybody is available for an online meeting at any point in time. So the sense of employee burnout and stress, I think, is much more higher in this kind of a dynamic work environment. And the need of the hour, I believe, is to have empathetic leadership, which adopts a more personal style of management where you reach out to your team with a much higher level of awareness of the stress and strain they're going through.
Yeah.
And this kind of empathetic leadership style encourages team members to kind of show up their true, most authentic self and work to their fullest capacity. And also, share their concerns in an open manner.
Mm,
So remote working, I think, has kind of accelerated the conversion of the old school command and control style of management to what I would say connect and communicate style of leadership. So it has brought new opportunities for the businesses to improve their communication efforts, but
mm.
it also has its own challenges in terms of trying to maintain a motivated workforce.
Yeah, it's clearly a moment where things are changing. I'm just always when we get caught up in all of these new technologies, even some of the discussions on the macro trends, I'm always grounded in the fact that the audience and the players in this space are still human beings. And so, my father reminds me that, most of the principles and worries and anxieties that we have as human beings today, they've had for hundreds and hundreds of years. And you can see it in literature and history and even kind of major texts, as we all know. And so, humans don't change that much. So it's always kind of an interesting one to see how we will kind of bounce back and forth against all
Sure.
of these major changes. But here we are, Sujay. You are the man with the plan, 2024. And I can only imagine you're looking at already probably the early results for the year. But tell me about what you're seeing for 2024.
Yeah, so 2024, I think, is gonna be a year where the most agile of organizations, I think, will survive. It's all back to survival of the fittest. So the one who can react faster to the changing dynamic world all around us. So whether it is reacting to a new geopolitical flashpoint in terms of war or conflict, or change in macro policies, the moment, for example, the interest rate starts softening, the inflation starts coming off, are the organizations ready and geared up to react to that kind of an environment? And if there is a bigger supply chain disruption, again, because of trade tensions or war or any other issues, so are the organizations geared to manage and ready with alternate sources of supply? So the ones which have answers and plans ready for these kind of environments, the ones who are investing into tech solutions, who are looking to prepare themselves with data analytical tools or machine learning or other tech tools, I think are going to be the ones which will come out unscathed. But this is going to be a real year which will test the best amongst us.
That's I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. Well, that's gonna be good for all of us. Push us to the next level for sure. Well, so Jay,
Yeah.
it's been amazing chatting with you today. If someone wanted to learn more about what you and Olam Agri and your teams are working on, where's the best place to reach you?
I think anybody can just look me up on LinkedIn and send me a message. I'm always happy to have a chat. Or they can reach out to me on X or Twitter. Either way is easy to catch up, reach out to me.
Well, a wide-ranging conversation today here with you, Sujay. We've been talking a lot about really, I'd say, global business and some of the challenges that multinationals are facing and confronting, and also looking at how some of those things are evolving the way we do our work. We've been speaking to Sujay Sarkar. He is the Senior Vice President and Group Head of Corporate Finance for Olam Agri, and it's been a really great conversation. We've touched upon a lot of different areas that I think are quite important. We talked about some of the markets that could be showing some big promise. Certainly, I think, as Sujay referred to, Africa has kind of an abundance of opportunity and challenge, but it's not one problem or one opportunity. It's literally millions. And so I think the efforts there are going to be fascinating to watch. India shows tremendous promise, but also just looking at trade in general and some of the factors that Sujay raised, like just microchips, how that's going to play out. How will we work on the global basis when there's such a demand for this technology, but it requires all of us to find a way to work together for the better of all of us. We've looked at technology today, generative AI, and it's been interesting Gartner has a lovely thing, the hype cycle of technology, and we certainly have gone through the early stages of just hype, hype, hype. I would say that it's the vast majority of executives that I talk to seem to still really have very, very little understanding of how it's going to impact their businesses. But, talking to Sajay today, you can see the impact it can have in terms of efficiencies, in terms of speed, in terms of informing decisions. So it's quite a powerful tool, and it will be exciting to see how the utilization of this stuff starts to scale moving forward. Sajay, thank you so much for being on the show today, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you, Tan, for having me. It was great talking to you.